So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Kathy, seconded by Councilman Powell. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Council meetings are also televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the February 2nd, 2016 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on February 9th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Powell, seconded by Pacheco. That's the one I heard. Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the February 16th bills and claims as audited by City Manager McDonald.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Miller, seconded by Councilman Hiley.
No, it was me.
Johnson. And any abstentions? Please cast your vote. Should we have cleared that before we got to it?
Did I not? I thought I had it cleared. No.
Let's clear it.
I'll clear it. I thought I had it clear.
Okay, please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
The council will now address the main business portion of the meeting. Council carries out business by three types of action: by ordinance, resolution, and minute action. Ordinances require 3 readings and votes, whereas other items are passed by 1. Ordinances create or modify local law, whereas resolutions and minute actions provide for the council to carry out its business. These various actions have different publication and public hearing requirements, and consent items are typically routine and will not be discussed by council. Items not listed as consent will be discussed in an open forum, and there is a process for the public as well as council members to pull something off consent for that discussion. Council will now consider establishing the schedule of future public hearings, which are held for the purpose of obtaining public input. Public hearings are also held for items such as annexations, liquor licenses, transactions, passing of budget, zone changes. Public hearings also require public notice via publication in the newspaper. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing March 1st, 2016 as the public hearing date for consideration of fiscal year 2016 budget adjustments. Renewal of retail liquor license number 21, Modern Electric Company, located at 246 West 1st Street. Transfer of ownership, retail liquor license number 1 from Tin Shack LLC, doing business as Poplar Wine and Spirits, located at 1016 South Poplar, to Mocha Ranch LLC, doing business as Poplar Wine and Spirits, located at 1016 South Poplar. The annexation and plat of a portion, a portion of the Southwest Quarter, Section 3, Township 33 North, Range 79 West, 6 p.m., Natrona County, Wyoming, to create La Hacienda Edition and establish zoning as City Zoning Classification C2 General Business. Annexation and plat of a portion of the Northeast Quarter, Section 22, and all of the Northwest Quarter, of Section 23, Township 33 North, Range 79 West, 6 p.m. in Natrona County, Wyoming, to create Heritage Hills Edition Number 5 and rezoning of same from Natrona County zoning classification UA Urban Agriculture and SR1 Suburban Residential to city zoning classifications R2 1-unit residential and R3 1 to 4-unit residential. Vacation and replat of lots 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, and 16, a portion of Hope Street right-of-way, and Tract A of Heritage Hills Edition Number 3 to create Heritage Hills Edition Number 4. Sale of the 2006 Ford Paratransit bus to the Natrona County Sheriff's Office, and also establishing April 19th, 2016 as a public hearing date for consideration of the annexation compliance with the Wyoming state statutes to determine if the annexation of the La Hacienda Edition complies with Wyoming statute 15-1-402.
Wow. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved.
Seconded?
Moved by Vice Mayor Kathy, seconded by Councilman Miller. Any abstentions or nay votes?
What I need to abstain from the bus thing? I work for the sheriff's office. Would that be an abstention? Or,
I would recommend that. Just abstain from that particular item.
okay, I'll abstain from that item then.
Which is,
A1, 5A1G.
thank you. Any other abstentions? Okay, cast your vote, please.
Oops.
With the abstention of Councilman Johnson noted of 5A1G, motion passes.
And council will now hold previously scheduled public hearings for the purpose of obtaining public input. Public hearings are held for items such as annexations, liquor license transactions, passage of the budget, and zone changes. The city attorney will present applicable exhibits for the issue, and the city manager will give council a report. Members of the audience will then be asked to speak either in favor or against the issue, and then the council will discuss the issue and act upon it if necessary. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the annual renewal of all currently issued liquor licenses. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
I do, Your Honor. I have 7 exhibits for this item. Exhibit number 1 being correspondence from Tracy Belser to V.H. McDonald, dated February 16th, 2016. Excuse me. Exhibit number 2, that being the affidavit of publication as published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated January 27th, 2016. Exhibit 3 being an affidavit of website publication as published on the City of Casper website, dated January 14th, 2016. In addition to those, we have some additional affidavits of publication because of the timing that some of the applications came in. Exhibit number 4 being an affidavit of publication as published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated January 27th, 2016. Exhibit number 5, affidavit of website publication as published on the Casper City website, dated January 21st, 2016. Exhibit number 6 being the affidavit of publication as published in the Casper Star Tribune, that document dated February 10th, 2016. And exhibit number 7, that being an affidavit of website publication as published on the City of Casper website, dated January 21st, 2016.
Thank you. City Manager report.
Your Honor, annually, all City of Casper liquor licenses must be renewed. This includes retail, limited retail, restaurant, bar and grill, and specialty licenses such as microbreweries and satellite wineries. The licensing period for this renewal will be the 12-month period starting April 1st, 2016. In total, there are 91 of the 92 issued licenses being presented for renewal tonight. License number 21 issued to Modern Electric Company is not included because of the timing of the transfer that Council recently approved. License 21, however, will be presented for renewal at the March 21st, 2016 regular council meeting. The highlights of this year's renewals are Of the license being presented tonight, 9 license holders accumulated demerit points during the year. You earned demerit points for having been a conviction occurring at the licensed location for an alcohol-related violation. And in addition to the 9 that points were awarded, 2 more cases are pending trial dates to see if those are convictions. And if they are, the demerit points for those convictions will be on next year's licensing renewal. However, with those 9 holders, no one accumulated demerit points to any extent that they'd be subject to any suspension or revocation actions under the municipal code. License numbers 6 and 36 are proposed to be renewed with the stipulations and conditions previously placed on these licenses. The Casper Police Department compiles a report for the City Council of calls for services at the addresses of the city liquor licenses. It was a pretty good year for dealers, and no individual dealer stood out as having any concern about the responsibility of selling alcohol. They all appeared to do a pretty good job this year. There was one individual that in their application disclosed they had a conviction for an alcohol-related violation. However, that only plays into renewals if that violation occurred within the last 10 years. This was older than 10 years, so it didn't have any bearing on this renewal. All restaurant and bar and grill licenses have to meet the requirement that 60% of their sales comes from food services, and all the restaurant and bar licenses that submit applications indicated that on their applications, that they did meet the 60% test. And lastly, as you just heard from the city attorney, all necessary publications, including the website publications, were done this year. And so these are all up for renewal to council tonight. And again, license number 21 will be held, that renewal will be held March 1st. And that time, all the liquor licenses will be renewed if council approves all renewals.
Thank you, City Manager McLean. At this time, I would like to ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the liquor license renewals, please approach the lectern. People wishing to speak in favor of this mass renewal. Welcome, Mr. Reed.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, member of the councils. I'm Michael Reed. I reside at 1615 Lucre Drive, forgot my address, 82609. I appear before you as one of the owners of Tin Shack LLC, doing business as Poplar Wine and Spirits. But on behalf of the Natrona County liquor dealers, I hope you can see that in the past year, we've worked pretty hard to straighten up some of the issues that we've had out there, and we've really worked hard to improve the Safe Ride program. So I would hope that you could pass this evening with everybody voting aye. I know last year we had some issues, and I think we've got them behind us, and we appreciate the work that we've done with the Casper Police Department. They've really done a good job for us. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if you had any.
Any questions for Mr. Reed?
Mr. Reed, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst year in Casper that you have ever seen as far as compliance and the efforts of the liquor dealers to monitor minors' access to alcohol and fights in the parking lot, all the things that we've been worried about over the years. 10 being the best year you've ever seen, how would you rate the past year?
I wouldn't give us a 10, but I'd give us a 9. I think you can tell by the compliance checks we're doing our job. I know there were compliance checks these past 2 weekends, and the reason I know that is we got checked twice and passed, of course, and I think most everybody did. We haven't really heard anything, but I think you've seen the number of fights and really tough incidences go down, and I think that helped with the non-renewal of a license, and so I think everybody's trying to really do a good job.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Reed?
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor of the issues involving the liquor license renewals? I welcome you to approach the lectern. Let your voice be heard. Anyone else speak in favor? All right. At this time, I would like to ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the liquor license renewals to please finish the lecture. Those speaking in opposition. Okay, going once, here we go. I now declare the public hearing closed. There being no one else to speak in favor or against. So, the chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action, renew all currently issued liquor licenses.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Powell, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Discussion.
I had an interesting conversation with one of our local attorneys, and sometimes it's hard to weigh, what really happens when we are doing demerits and inspections on some of our great local bar owners. But one of the things that was brought up is that some of our methods could be questionable, and I hesitate to think that's true because I'm assuming that we have pretty strict guidelines, but at some point, maybe even V, if I can just share them with you, what they filled me in on, just some kind of unique circumstances that maybe weren't taken into account for. I just might pass them on to you to look at. I don't know if it's true or not, but maybe if it is true, maybe there is something that we need to do just a little bit differently. So, but I can share those with you later this week.
Pass those on and we'll take a look at it.
Okay, perfect.
Without getting into any granular detail, are we talking about the general feeling of entrapment, of putting a 20-year-old into a bar and seeing if the liquor establishment bites?
One of the specific examples was that there was an underage driver with their parent in the vehicle. And let's face it, I don't know a lot about how these work. But parent orders through child because child is closest at the window, and you get a ticket for that. And maybe that's not really the way they should order their alcohol, but I guess I maybe wouldn't have thought about that, but I haven't hit the drive-through. So, but those were some of the questions that were asked, and I don't know if that's normal or troublesome, but you might be able to just educate me a little bit better on how our process works.
Okay. More discussion. Councilman Hiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I think last meeting we had a discussion about parked licenses, and the question came up about how many licenses were parked. I noted in the report and the meeting notes tonight that there are 4 parked liquor licenses, and I just wanted to share that with the public who were asking.
That's a good point. These 92 licenses that you cited, do they or do not include the 4 that are parked?
They include the 4 retail licenses that are parked.
Okay.
And with one of those being currently, the building's being currently built and brought online right now. The others are truly parked in attorney's offices or non-functioning buildings.
So the one that we parked the last regular session was the number 2 for us, but they had been parked previous? If I remember that correctly?
That one had been a license, I believe, Your Honor, that one had been a license that was parked at another location, transferred to this location, but they were doing it's a retail license, and I hate to use the word with it, but they were only selling on order. They weren't opening as a bar or restaurant. They were ordering. You could go in there and they could sell, then they'd meet their minimum requirement of the dollars of alcohol purchased from the state, and that creates it as a functioning license.
Okay. Any more questions? Any more discussion? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'll just echo Mr. Reed's comment. I think the liquor dealers should be complimented on doing an excellent job over the past year. It's unfortunate that when things go well, it's not a story, but it should be. Compliance has been excellent.
Okay, for just general knowledge, this council, and this I'm addressing to you, and maybe Bill can pick it up if he wants, but this council goes through a process of renewing licenses on fairly regular occasion. So why do we just get to renew them all at the beginning of the year, and then we discuss them on an individual basis? How does that work? Is that if they're just some activity where they're wanting to transfer it, or they're within a certain statutory time period to renew?
This action tonight is renewal of all licenses. You do have the one exception out there, which license 21, which is a renewal because of the timing of that transfer very late in the application process. I think the application, the renewal application was already in, and it didn't apply to the new owners, so that one was going to be done separately. And there's enough time to do that one separately. Throughout the year, Your Honor, there's various transfers of ownership, of transfer of location, or transfer of both ownership and location that the council gets directly through the year and is subject to council's approval.
But the general practice is we renew en masse, all of them at the beginning of the year, and the police officer report lets us know if there's trouble at any one of these venues. But otherwise, we just automatically renew every year.
I don't know if I use automatically, but it's brought to you every year as a regular scheduled renewal at the same time.
Okay.
Correct?
As a matter of course.
Yes.
Maybe not automatically. All right.
Discretion there to renew or renew or not.
And as I understood the report, the demerits are very far under that threshold that would actually merit any action.
The demerit process is a little bit complicated in that it includes accumulating demerits over a 12-month period, not necessarily the last year. So it's kind of a rolling 12-month period. But I believe with all these, the PD didn't indicate that these were any accumulation from the last 12-month period that would trigger in the minimum threshold for that demerit point action. It's not necessarily the last 12 licensing, 12. You could end up in 3 months from now have a demerit issue in front of you because of an accumulation of demerit points.
Right, because it's a circulating calendar.
Yeah.
Got it. Any more questions? Any more discussion? I'm kind of tempted to bring Captain Scholes to this lectern to describe the process, because as I understand it, aren't you the guy that kind of is coordinating compliance checks? You used to, maybe? Okay, all right. Never mind. We'll let you off the hook. Any more discussion?
Mayor, if I may add,
Yeah.
actually the procedures we follow are set out in state statute.
Right.
And so I think in answer to Councilman Slaughter's questions, we need to look at what was brought to her and take a look at how that procedure was applied. Yeah. Because it's a very strict policy, and at least our office is very careful about how that's applied.
Right. And the state statute is what establishes the liquor commission that issues the licenses and all of that?
Well, you have the statutory provisions that control alcohol through state law, but then within that is a specific provision that governs the process that has to be used, how undercover agents are used, how they're accompanied with an adult, and how that process takes place.
Right. And we recently amended our ordinance to try and get a little more flexibility in that, because it does require kind of setting up a business owner
I don't know, I'd say that.
Yeah, I know, that's not good phrasing.
I think that's not really a correct statement of how it works. But what we did, we made an amendment to make it possible that if a employee of a bar makes an honest mistake, that we can work out a deal in that case. But if that happens, the bar owner is still assessed the points for an unlawful distribution of the alcohol. So that way the points still accumulate against the bar owner. We have some flexibility to be fair to an honest mistake.
Okay. All right. Well, any more discussion? All right. Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
All members voting aye. Motion passes.
Consideration of the next item will be by ordinance. Council will now discuss the ordinance for the Hambry Edition number 2. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a vacation and replat creating the Hembry Addition Number 2, a subdivision agreement and zone change of the proposed Hembry Addition Number 2 subdivision in the city of Casper, Wyoming.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Seconded.
Was that Councilman Johnson? And seconded by Councilman Miller. Okay, so it's officially on the floor. Ms. Linda Bergeron has asked to speak with us. Ms. Bergeron, please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hello.
Linda Bergeron, 2352 South Kaufman Avenue. To me, this is clouded in a bit of secrecy, and I still haven't gotten an answer to. It was in the December meeting, 2015, it was discussed that there was shared access between the south two lots. And they were asking about access to the lots on the north. The answer to that is there is a reason that there is not one on the north side that I would rather not discuss right now. Is it time now that we could discuss access on the north side? The ability to access the land and be able to leave the land.
Well, turn that into a question and I'll see how I can do.
Okay. That question was asked to Liz Becker, and she said they're working on it. She's had a month to work on it. I wonder if there's an answer to if there is an access to the land on the north side as far as a way out.
Are we talking about that
The Hembry Edition.
tiny little wedge at the very top?
Is that the one to the furthest north?
Yes.
Okay.
Craig Collins, please help us.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Craig Collins with the City Planning Office. To give Ms. Bergeron an answer, there is access available to that northern lot. We always try to minimize the points of access to subdivisions. Thus, that's why we have a shared access between two lots. But the use of the northern lot may end up being a different use than the middle two lots, and that is up to the applicant and property owner as to what they want to use that for. But as of right now, it could obtain a curb cut if they wanted. I'm not sure that that will be necessary based on the ultimate use of the property.
So would the curb cut be to Robertson Road? That's my question.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they have frontage on Robertson Road. They could acquire a curb cut. And we did combine the curb cuts for the middle two lots in order to reduce the points of access, which is a traffic control measure.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, and then this was kind of backwards in how this was approved at the planning and zoning meeting. The replat was done first and then the zone change. Now, in the third reading here, you're passing them both at the same time without that being individually approved, is that correct?
I believe that the replat and the zone change are being done simultaneously.
And that's proper procedure for the city council?
Mr. Mayor, pardon me. Yes, it is. Actually, a replat can be approved by resolution, but because it's tied with a zone change, that requires 3 readings of an ordinance. So in order to simplify the process, we combine those two into one action so that it speeds up the process for the homeowner and rather than doing 2 separate items. A lot of times we'll do even an annexation, zone change, and a platting at the same time.
So because it's getting a zone change, we're combining it procedurally. We could just put through a replat with 1 vote, real quick, minute action, but because it's a zone change requires 3 readings, we've combined them procedurally.
Okay, excellent. Okay, then I have one more question.
Yes.
In your packet, you have a federal funding being approved for a walkway on Robertson Road. Will that affect this property? Or is it on this, is it on the east side or is it on the west side?
I believe it's on the west side.
It's on the west side.
Yeah. And that's part of the trails network.
Okay. Okay.
So it's a long-term vision of extending the Platte River Parkway west.
Okay, but it won't affect this property on the property, correct?
I believe that the underpass that we're talking about, is that what we're talking about?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the area, and the west side of Robertson Road is a wide right-of-way. There, if you go to the north towards the trailer park, you'll see some, quite wide pathway along the road, and I believe the intention of that grant money is to extend from the trailer park to the bridge on the west side of the road.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Ms. Bergeron, just so that you would know, you were asking about how we combine things. We just set for March 1st a public hearing for, and it was item E under the consent agenda, but it's for the annexation, plat, and rezoning, all 3 in one public hearing. So that is we just approved another one.
Okay.
We do them all at the same time.
Okay, thank you kindly. Appreciate that.
Okay. Well, discussion, council. Yes. All right. Well, any amendments before we continue? Do we need to call for a second, or recognition?
You already did all that?
Oh, yeah.
That's on the record.
Okay. Right, Johnson and then Miller. Okay. Please cast your vote.
Oh, we can't yet.
And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
ready. Okay, the council will now consider consent resolutions. Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 8A1, authorizing an amendment to the employment agreement with VH McDonald as the city manager for 40 hours of administrative leave benefit consistent with City of Casper standard employment contracts. Item 8A2, authorizing a professional services contract for third-party collection agency services with Collection Center, Inc. of Wyoming. Item 8A3, authorizing a contract with Dell, Inc. for a 3-year Microsoft licensing enterprise agreement. Item 8A4, approval of a resolution of support for the Economic Development Joint Powers Board, Wyoming Business Council Community Enhancement Grant application. Item 8A5, authorizing a contract for professional services with Recycled Materials LLC for the demolition of 2 buildings. Item 8A6, authorizing agreement with Burback Aquatics, Inc. for the Washington Park Pool Improvements Project. Item 8A7, authorizing amendment number 2 to the agreement with Stantec Consulting Services for the North Platte River Restoration Project. Item 8A8, authorizing agreement with WWC Engineering, Inc. for the design and construction administration for the Robertson Road Trail Continuation Project. Item 8A9, authorizing amendment number 2 to the agreement with Olson Lavoie Collaborative for the Mike Cedar Pool Project. Item 8A10, authorizing agreement with Stevens Engineering, Inc. for design and construction administration for the Casper Ice Center Chiller System Replacement Project. Item 8A11, authorizing agreement with Casper Building Systems, Inc. for the construction of Fire Station Number 6. Item 8A12, authorizing license agreement with the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks Lodge 1353 for installation of a decorative metal bench within East 7th Street right-of-way. Item 8A13, authorizing amendment number 1 to the agreement with Heinbond LLC for design and construction administration services for the addition of a materials recovery facility to the Baylor Building renovation project. Item 8A14, authorizing agreement with GW Mechanical, Inc. for the Life Steps Campus Building E heating system replacement project. The next 6 items authorize contracts for miscellaneous traffic studies for site plans and subdivisions. Item 8A15, contract with Dow. Item 8A16, contract with Drexel Barrel and Company. Item 8A17, contract with General Grants Group. Item 8A18, contract with Jacobs Engineering Group, Inc. Item 8A19, contract with Sustainable Traffic Solutions, Inc. Item 8A20, contract with Vista West Engineering. Item 8A21, authorizing acceptance of a grant from the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security for use by the Police Department for criminal intelligence training and other services covered by the grant. Item 8A22, supporting the efforts of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities legislative agenda seeking appropriations during the 2016 budget session.
The council will now consider consent resolutions. Please, already did that. The council will entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Powell, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Council will now consider minute action items. These are routine business items that do not require a resolution. Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 9A1, authorizing the appointment of Lance Banks to the Leisure Services Advisory Board to a 3-year term set to expire December 31st, 2018. Item 9A2, authorizing the purchase of 1 new front-end loader from Wyoming Machinery Company to be used in the Streets Division of the Public Services Department. Item 9A3, authorizing the purchase of 1 new loader-mounted snow blower from Coyce Brothers Equipment to be used in the Streets Division of the Public Services Department. Item 9A4, authorizing the purchase of 1 new Class 7 chassis from Jack's Truck and Equipment to be used in the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 9A5, authorizing the purchase of 1 new truck-mounted snow plow from Jack's Truck and Equipment to be used in the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 9A6, authorizing the purchase of one new dump body from Ameritech Equipment to be used in the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 9A7, authorizing the purchase of one new truck-mounted salt sander from CMI Tico to be used in the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 9A8, authorizing the purchase of 12 new half-ton pickups from Griner Motor Company to be used in the Public Services Department, Support Services Department, and the Community Development Department.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Hiley. I think it was seconded by Councilman Schlager. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
It is now time to invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to please come forward. We ask that you state your name and address.
I'm Brad Hopkins with the 221 North Park property. Just want to thank you for utilizing the CDBG funds and the great work of our Community Development Department and your concern for the homeless and needy, which will help our services at Central Wyoming Rescue Mission. So, thank you.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Hopkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you give us a little status report on where the project is, Mr. Hopkins?
We are
moving forward.
Well, we are moving forward. This is a new opportunity across the street from our 230 North property where we're expanding our shelters. So we've got a great building team committee of folks that are helping us put together plans. We've got 20,000 square feet that we're working towards, and just taking time. You know, this is, in the world of rescue missions, this is a unique opportunity to put up a brand new building. So we just don't want to miss anything in the process in serving our folks. So we're anticipating our process to begin in earnest here. We have cleared the land where Allen's Import was at, and so just finalizing exactly what we'll put on there. So thank you.
And
Yes.
how many beds will we have when it's all done?
When it's all done, combined with what we put on the 221 North Park property, well, let me just back up. At the new expansion itself, 150 beds is what we plan there. So we'll double our capacity for emergency shelter for both men and women and families at that location.
Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Appreciate your help.
Any more questions? Thank you. Who else wants to address council? Mr. Brown, welcome.
My name is Jeremy Brown, 2711 Zion Lane. I had come to the council again tonight. I actually forgot Mill's policy last time I was here. And I made copies for everyone this time. I was just kind of curious what you guys had reviewed and what your guys' thoughts are. The more I have thought about it, I do think the legislation does need to be changed. Where I do see an issue is it can be challenged, but it doesn't matter if it's 911 calls, any type of report. I mean, I could challenge it even right now. If the next controversial issue that happens here in town, I could get every single last piece of information that I wanted, and if it was denied, I could take it to the court, and then the courts would hash it out. That's what I don't understand, but in the same sense, I do understand viewing footage and reading incidents and altercations are two different types. You know, it's entirely different when you're viewing something. Because if they were to come in my house and say you guys wanted a copy of it, now you guys all have a copy of my house, I mean, that just opens the door for retaliation acts, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. So I do understand that. This last week I have been in contact with several legislator members down there in Cheyenne. So I will be doing something here in 2017 about this. I'm just curious about what you guys' thoughts are. What else needs to be changed?
Okay, I'll start out at least. All right, Jeremy, I did read the documentation that you sent, and I'm kind of siding with Chief Wetzel on this, and that the Laramie ordinance does have policies regarding, you know, when the camera's on, when it's off, and that's that kind of complication. But you actually made the point in your remarks, because as things stand right now, the way the statutes are written, everything that's on those cameras goes immediately into the realm of public disclosure.
Yes.
There are no safeguards, there are no switches, and essentially, it is actually prudent for Casper not to go ahead with body cameras until other people, other communities around this state actually have to define some of these missing areas in the law. And trust me, litigation will be coming, and it's kind of smart to let Laramie or Jackson Hole or maybe even the town of Mills to step into these legal snares of undefined law and let them litigate it, and then we will entertain the idea of cameras once those things are worked out.
I'll just take it down to Cheyenne and just deal with it down there, so.
Right. And I'm sorry to frustrate you on this, but I really see a lot of potential for stuff needing to get clarified.
Well, and from my understanding, when I had spoken to Dale Stadler from Laramie, like I said, at the end of the day, he is the one, because he is the custodian that makes all the decisions, whether to release it, from actually all 4 departments, what I've talked to him on the phone and through emails. They said that they do allow people to view the footage, but if it's something very sensitive, like going to someone's house, they deny it. I mean, if it's traffic stops, whatever, they let him do it, but other than that, and he said so far he has not been challenged, and I mean, I understand that, but like I said, after I read it, it could be challenged.
Right.
So I do understand that.
And rather than having an internal policy generated by the city to deal with those dicey, undefined areas of law, it's better to just let the state statute actually define those areas.
Well, see, and like that's where I guess I'm getting hung up on this, is that from Wetzel's presentation that I had looked at, some of the states that he had mentioned, like Florida, they completely have taken those videos completely out of public arena, like nobody can view those whatsoever. In my opinion, that totally defeats the purpose of a Freedom of Information Act, and it also defeats the purpose of transparency, showing the public what these police officers are doing.
I hear you, and I think one of the most neglected aspects about body cameras is they have a civilizing effect on everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know you're accountable. And I really like that. But we're still in the area where it's undefined in state statute, and until it is, we're just going to create a litigation problem if we go there.
I understand that. And like I said, if you guys have any thoughts, be more than happy to email me. Like I said, this won't be done until 2017, but I'm in the process of working with a few representatives. So,
and you know, I think that's the process. And Wyoming is so lucky because we are close enough to our citizen legislature that we can actually pick up the phone, call the legislative service office, and talk about how to actually define some of the state statutes. It's not such a big and cumbersome mechanism that you can't affect change, positive change. Yes.
I think where we left this last week is we had members of council who hadn't gone through the information yet, and so I don't think we were in a position to say we're not going to do this. I think what we said was we were going to all look at the information and then decide whether we wanted to discuss it again. So I don't think we are completely done.
Right.
We may be, once we have a chance to talk about it, at least until some legislative relief is provided, but I think it's still on the table for us.
Well, yeah, and I didn't want to leave everyone with the impression that it was a closed discussion, and I think, let's just step back and let other people's litigate. It's not a bad idea, but it's not effective leadership. So in my mind, yes, it's still a discussion that we want to have.
And maybe we'll have some ideas that can shortcut the long and cumbersome process of rewriting through the legislature. But so far, yeah.
Just a brief comment. Mr. Brown, I wanted to thank you for your efforts and your passion on this subject. I think we have come to a point where we believe that the best advice is to get legislation passed in the state, and when you go to Cheyenne and work on that subject, you know, I thank you for those efforts. That's the pathway forward. And the information you supplied and the efforts you've put into this are very impressive, so thank you.
Sir. Thank you. Any more questions or comments for Jeremy Brown? Anything else you want to say?
That's about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council? Welcome, Mr. Sweeney.
Good evening, Pat Sweeney, 951 North Kimball. Just in this, lengthy consent and minute action resolutions, I would just like to congratulate our local contractors and local companies for being low bidder on a number of projects. I think it's exciting that we're spending money locally and not having to depend on outside sources for the majority of these contracts. I do have, I'm really excited about the new fire station being awarded to Casper Building Systems. That almost assures 90% or better is going to be spent right here with subs, and instead of bringing folks from Colorado and Utah. I do have a couple of questions. One is on all of these traffic studies. Is there not an engineering or a company or a group located in Casper that does any of this kind of work, or is this such a specialized field that it takes, and there's so much work here, it takes, what, 7 different contractors to do different subdivisions and plannings? Was curious about that.
VH, you want to take a crack at that one?
Your Honor, I'll ask Andrew Beamer to fill in gaps that I missed, Public Service Director, but I know one issue is just an issue of availability. When the traffic studies are needed, they're needed, and so we keep quite a few of them on contract to do that, and Andrew could speak about the availability of local firms or anything.
How about it, Mr. Beamer? You want to give us some clarity?
Your Honor, Counsel, Mr. Sweeney, I'll be happy to. Traffic consultants are relatively specialized operations. You need a PTOE after your name, Professional Transportation Operations Engineer. And I'm not sure there's anybody in the city of Casper that actually has that designation. I mean, so we've got 7, but VH is correct. It's a pass-through mechanism. If we get a subdivision or a site plan that is large enough to require a traffic study, we simply send that out to those 7. They give us a scope back and a feedback, and then the developer needs to pay that fee before we execute a contract with just one of those 7 traffic consultant firms. Okay. Does that help?
Yeah.
So instead of PE behind your name, you need PTOE.
As well as PE, yes.
Wow, okay. All right. Well, Pat, anything else for Andrew before he walks? Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that clarification. I just was curious on that. And then on the piece of equipment that that local folks didn't get on the snow blower from the folks down in Commerce City. I wonder if we had any local bids on that particular piece. Just was curious if, you know, if we didn't, we didn't, but just was curious on that. But I do commend you on all of that. That was certainly a good speed reading exercise. So lastly, I would ask Your Honor on Casper Building Systems in the fire station number 6, it seems to me that was a 1 cent number 15 project. And I'm curious how, and this is probably a good one for VH, but just for my own edification, with tax revenues being down, obviously that also unfortunately impacts our 1 cent collection. And how does that work? I know in the past you've tried to build collections up, then start the project. Will we need to, in particular on a large project like the fire station, will we have to go out and basically finance that until we've collected all the money, or how do we normally do that on projects like that? And I might be wrong, it might be part of 14 and all the rest of 15.
Okay. Well, I heard from Councilman Powell that it's 15 and not 14. I was thinking it was some unallocated from 14, but yes, 1 cent money.
Your Honor, 1% 15, and we the city collects quite a bit of that revenue up front, so we have cash to do this. We don't have to finance any of these projects to do this. However, with 1% 15, and Mr. Sweeney's correct with the decline in sales tax, we are taking a close look at that. 1% 15 receipts just broke through that very conservative number that we had per month, and we just came under that. So we've got a concern about out year projects with 1% 15 to collect enough funds to figure out which ones we can do and which ones we can't do. We're doing a close review of that through the spring, but right now we have the cash to do it, and we'll be okay, and we won't go to financing that.
So far we've got the money that we've budgeted for the projects that we're seeing now, and you will let us know if the financial picture merits any change from course.
We will. We won't. We'll have to watch and figure out which items we bid to ensure that we have the cash for them.
But so far, we've got the money for the projects that we let.
So far, it's holding up, and it's razor thin, but capital are important. And, you know, as both the effort to get a much-needed firehouse, fire station number 6 replaced, that's probably one of the most deteriorated ones. And then, you know, it's an economic engine for the community, so we keep spending capital money to keep contractors going and jobs going.
And we also get the fire coverage where the town has been moving to.
Yeah, it's going across the street, so it's not changing much there, so we're in good shape there.
All right.
No, and I think anytime we can, you know, especially with this downturn, and City Manager McDonald's absolutely right on track. If we, you know, can keep those dollars local, it just keeps our local folks employed. We don't need to be worrying about contractors in Colorado and other places. We need to keep our folks employed. So, you know, any kind of policy guidelines that could be explored by council on some of these things when we're really looking at the spending, I certainly would encourage. that the city attorney will allow you to do within state statutes. So, but on borrowing, I don't know, is it possible, council and Your Honor, but city manager, is it possible if you did have to borrow, can you borrow and repay reserves in order to cash flow a project? Or has it been the policy, money's got to be in the bank, such as Mike Cedar Pool or this fire station number 6, before you move forward?
Your Honor, Casper, because of its conservativeness, has always had adequate cash and will anticipate to continue to have adequate cash. The city technically runs a pooled cash, so all the funds cash is put together, yet they're accounted for separately, stringently accounted for separately. So we have cash to cover these, and we wouldn't. I can't imagine we would have to go out and borrow in any form. And we close to what Mr. Sweeney is talking about. We can borrow internally. We do that occasionally, but that's pretty infrequent. We do that too. But we're in good shape for cash in 1% funds, and I don't want to drop it as a threat, but it may be around the corner with some of these latest sales tax numbers we have seen. We have to take a long, hard look at what we can really get accomplished with 1% 15.
But as a general rule, the projects that go forward are the ones that we can fund, and if we can't fund it, it doesn't move forward.
Right. And these projects are long-term too.
Right.
They take several months to happen, and we're continuing to have cash flow during those periods.
We're even approving them in the previous year's budget. Yeah. Okay. You will let this council know when we start chewing into reserves.
Oh, you will see a report next week about that.
Okay.
No, and I think my point, Your Honor, is I would much rather see us borrow against our reserves internally than have to go out and do a bond if we had to. But, you know, our cash management, you know, we're lucky to have a city manager at this point that understands all of this and has been there. So we're lucky. You're lucky.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. I wasn't quite sure what our stance would be. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
In answer to a couple of comments, Mr. Sweeney, the Wyoming Machinery purchase, the front end loader, and the trucks from Griner Ford were both through the state bid, so those were local. And then you asked about if there was somebody local on the snow blower. There were only 2 bids received. That's what I was doing, was going back looking. The other bid came from Kodiak America for a Kodiak XXX model. So that was all we wound up with.
I didn't know if Ameritech or CMI Tico or
none of them bid anything.
Honan, but so thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Who else would like to address council? Please approach the lectern. Welcome, Mr. DePaul.
Honorable, how are you tonight?
Doing okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Joe DePaul, 1818 East Yellowstone. You know, it's funny that you all came up. I must have picked the right night to come down here, because my talk tonight is purely economics. I'm not going to get under case about anything, but I am going to make a demand of all of you. But first you need to know this. This concerns currency and how it flows through a system. Now, I've stood before this city council, or one a long time ago, and in fact, Ms. Slager was the only one on the council at that time. That's how long ago it was. Every dollar that we spend with a locally owned business, it will generate $6 in spending power before it evaporates through the system. Every dollar we spend out of state owned, like Walmart or something, it will only generate 5. There's a $1 difference. So every time we spend $1 with somebody that's not locally owned, we cost our community $1. But that's not what I'm here for. This is just a very basic thing, a project I call the dollar maintenance project that I've been trying to get going for years. I've just had a lot of opposition for some reason. But what I'm talking about today is declaring war on internet shopping. Last Black Friday, it was reported that 14% of all of Christmas shopping during that weekend was done on the internet. And they gave the figures, and so I did the losses of what it would cost communities when it comes to that spending power dollar, and it worked out to about $30 billion through the entire country with just one weekend. I don't know how it affected Casper because I don't have those figures. But if we were consistent, 14% of the money that was spent on that weekend went out of state without anybody going out of state. But it's just as bad as if you go out of state and spend your money. So it's like up in Sheridan, everybody's whining because people go to Billings to buy their goods to beat the sales tax. Things like that, you know. Shopping on the internet does the same thing. That's about anywhere from 80 to 85% of our currency that disappears when we shop at the internet. Now that's a big loss. Now you're talking about sales tax and all of that drops. Well, that's 80% of the money that's spent. We don't collect sales tax on it, and that's going to contribute to our sales tax shortfalls tremendously. When I talk to people, I find a very selfish, well, I should save this. And I says, well, you know, if you're going to save 20 cents, you might cost yourself a job because we only have this much currency. And if we start shrinking it and shrinking it, shrinking it, we also start shrinking the money that's used to support jobs, taxes, and everything else. So what I'd like you to do is declare a war using your advertising dollars and stuff like that, not to just say shop Casper first, but to say, look, you're costing us a minimum of $4.50 for every dollar you spend on that internet. Now that's, you know, those are unacceptable terms. And if it gets worse, if we go to 20, then 25% or 30%, you know, it could be worse, make this bust worse than any bust we've ever had. The last time we had a big bust was in the 80s. I lived through it. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have as many out-of-state owned fast food, and most of our hotels were locally owned. Now they're all out-of-state owned, you know, and so we're not generating the money just because of that. But when you add the internet, you know, that's really going to cause a currency shortfall. So we need to do something about it as a community. Now, you all raised your hand and said, elect me to be leader. So do some leading. Lead this community into understanding the importance of shopping locally. You know, Pat talked about, you know, hiring locally owned contractors and things like that, and that is very important. But so is this, because this is something, it's worse than people traveling out of state, because you don't even have to travel, you just send your money. And if you download a song, well, Vegetation Records, I mean, excuse me, that's a whole line, Sonic Rainbow, you know, can sell you music. Well, we lose that whole $6 that could have been spent down there, you know, and that's a tremendous loss to our economy. So I'm demanding that you all take on the lead, because I've tried for several years to get this point across, and I just run into deaf ears and people who refuse to do something like read a book on how currency flows through a system. And that's all you need to do to understand it. But anyway, I'd appreciate if you would take on this ball and run with it, because like I said, I'm getting tired of running into one obstacle after another, even with my dollar maintenance program, which is just basically trying to get people that own local businesses to put a simple poster in their window that says we're a dollar maintenance business. In other words, we generate $1 more than Walmart or Sonic or all these other places, you know, for our economy. And that's how important it is. When we were doing the boom, it didn't hurt as much, but now we're in a bust. And like I said, all of you that have lived the 80s busts, you know, saw how serious that was and how many people went out of business and all that, and how many of these people that come to Casper, and as soon as the bus goes, boop, they were out of here. The loudest mini boost in the 90s, you know, how many people vacated, you know, Casper, because, boy, they see trouble, they have no loyalty to us. We've got to start generating some loyalty to each other as a community, you know, especially economically. Otherwise, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And that's a very important thing. And how do you feed your kids if there's no cash to be spent to hire you, you know? So anyway, I'll rest my case.
Any questions
I hate-
for Joe DePaul? Comments? Okay, I hear you. And I, for years, made a purpose of going to the Sonic Rainbow and finding obscure recordings of classical music, which you could order on Amazon in a matter of minutes. And I did that to purposely help a local business. But I don't think that there's any way that this council can actually declare a war on online shopping.
Well, you can with an advertising campaign. You back Shop Casper first. It's the same thing. It's just more detail. It's just more information beginning about exactly why it's important. See, Casper first failed to do that. So did 307. You know, they failed to show the people exactly how devastating that can be. And so you've got the advertising budget to do something like that. And that's what I mean by declaring war with an advertising campaign. I don't expect, I mean, it'd be illegal for you to try to pass an ordinance. I'd be down on your case anyway about that. I said, where do you...
Right. What about freedom of speech and all
Yeah,
that?
well, yeah, you know how I am. I'm bigger than that. So,
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you know, you're the leaders here. And this is a very important topic. And it's all education. It's nothing else. It's not saying bad Walmart or bad Kmart or anything like that. It's just saying the one thing all these people have in common is they cost $1 for every dollar you spend there. But more importantly, you cost us a minimum of $4.50 for every dollar you spend on that. And that can mean your job.
Right.
And I think that falls under your reign of responsibility because, you know, it's just part of the whole thing. Somebody's got to do it, and I'm a miserable failure at it, so maybe you can do it, and then you can take the heat for failing if the people don't, you know, because I get all sorts of, like, who was it, one of the political people here that I try to talk this in, well, it'll make local businesses become more creative. I mean, we just went in from one ear to the other. I mean, you get incredibly lame responses about this thing, and so it needs a full-on advertising, you know, drive to keep people from, or at least raise the social consciousness. You know, it's kind of like when MAD first started out, and they said, well, you know, designated drivers, and brought everybody's social conscience that maybe you shouldn't go out there and get hammered and then go drive down the road at 80 miles an hour. You know, well, it's the same thing. It's just meant to raise social consciousness, the members of Casper, that, you know, we might not like each other, we might not always get along with each other, but the one thing we're stuck with is our economy, and we're so isolated here. You know, people don't realize that. When I try to talk to people, the Casper Speedway, for instance, and Ms. Flagler knows how I feel about that place, they all they dream about these national sanctioning bodies and all this, and they dream that all these people are going to come to Casper to race. You know, maybe 4 or 5 people from Gillette comes down to race. That's because we're so isolated. It's not because we don't have a great racetrack. It's just that we're so isolated. And when you do things, or like when I was promoting concerts, I would try to explain to a promoter, yeah, we got 50,000 people then when I was promoting them, you know. I says, well, how much around you? And I says, oh, maybe another 5,000. And they think, you got to be kidding. I said, no, you got to go 120 miles before you get to a city that has 10,000 people in it. That's how isolated, that's how much of an island we are, and that's how important educating people on the dangers of what the internet poses to our local economy. And that's all it is, period. But I've never demanded anything of you before, but I do this time because that's how important I feel about it. You know, it's just, it can be a life and death for a lot of people, including my little business, you know. So with that, I'll rest again unless there's any more comments. I see a lot of heads nodding, so hopefully you'll get around to doing it.
You're absolutely right. And we do have like a 3-hour time barrier to the next significant sized city. And that's only one direction. We are in the middle of nowhere. And everybody who is of a certain generation and carries around a smartphone is going to tell you, because of that isolation, I do my shopping online.
Yeah.
And it's a paradigm shift in commerce. And it's going to have its winners and losers. And there's...
Unfortunately, though, we're going to have more losers than winners.
Well, I hear you, and I do believe that that bust in the 80s, you know, there were a lot of people who hung in here just because they like it here. And they talk about diversity in the economic base, but
Yeah, we're too reliant on oil.
Yeah.
Here, you know, we need to diversify it, and I've got opinions on that and things to do, but some of them are fanciful, like maybe building an indoor ski resort, you know, so that we'd have year-round tourism and creating Casper to become a destination point for tourists and things
right,
like that.
we do need to think outside the box.
Oh, yeah, and I do that real well.
Okay.
Anyway, if that's it, then I'll let you all go home. It's NICS is on tonight, I guess, so we got to go home.
Thank you, Mr. DePaul. Anyone else care to address council?
Mayor and council, Linda Bergeron, 2352 South Kaufman Avenue. I have a question about your resolution concerning WHAM, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Looks like you're lobbying the legislature for money. I have a concern as to intent. I was in a county commission meeting. WHAM came and spoke to that, to the BOCC. They said at that time that they were going to try and get the mill levy increased for our property taxes to increase. Now I want to make sure that that is not the intent. I'd like someone to speak to that because it really does concern me and it's bothered me ever since I heard it. Also, I'd like to ask, does WHAM have a website?
I am going to summon Councilman Powell because he is our WHAM expert.
The resolution is in support of a $90 million request for direct distribution monies, which are divided amongst all the counties and municipalities around the state. And WHAM is taking the position, and $90 million is in the governor's budget. WHAM is requesting that that amount be up to $105 million, which is still $80 million less than was appropriated in the last budgetary session. So the municipalities and the counties are being very frugal and accepting their share of the burden associated with the downturn. But WHAM, that's strictly what, this has nothing to do with property taxes, this resolution. This is us saying we also want to see this amount of direct distribution money allocated to the municipalities and the counties. And Casper has enough, I guess you could say, ballast in our budget that we can withstand some of the ups and downs of state funding, maybe a little better than some of the smaller communities. But without this direct distribution money, towns like Evansville and Midwest and Edgerton, they're going to suffer greatly. And so that's really all this is us as a municipality saying we support WHAM's efforts to get this money in the budget.
Does WHAM get money for their lobbying?
Yeah, of course, the municipalities all pay to be members of WHAM. That's how you fund an office staff.
Okay, so is this money is out of the governor's budget? It's there seems to be quite a problem with what the state has available.
Right.
So it's money that's in the general fund, I assume?
Yes.
Okay.
This was the Joint Appropriations Committee included this $90 million in the budget that they're proposing, but obviously this is a moving target as these figures come in as far as the income projections. So it's just going to be very difficult. But the cities and counties have already agreed to not lobby for what's called consensus funding, which is fully 40 to 45% of what the state provides in its budget. So by saying we will get along without that, we're taking a much larger percentage cut than any of the agencies, any of the programs around the state, by far. So I think the cities and counties are doing their share to share the burden here, and then some.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Ms. Bergeron, as a new member of council, I had the opportunity to receive a letter from WHAM, and I have their website on the letterhead.
Oh, thank you kindly.
It is www.wyomuni.org.
Thank you, Mr. Heidi. WYOMUNI.org.
Excellent. Thank you kindly. Appreciate that.
And that's the first I heard about anything with property tax, so that,
Yeah, that was very concerning to me, and he was very excited that that was on his plate, so
news to me.
thank you.
Any more questions for Ms. Bergeron? Okay. Anyone else would like to address council? Welcome, Mr. Lamont.
Tracy Lamont, 3581, 721 East 12th at 3581 on the mine. I come late. I think I told you this before because I go to the commissioner meetings beforehand, and Canay, your husband's doing a wonderful job over there. Mayor, I just want to commend you for the participative approach you're taking. You don't put any time limit on anybody up here so far, and I'm impressed. I get 3 minutes over there, and you can't get anything on the table in 3 minutes. They don't want to hear anything. And I can feel, I've been in the people business for a long time, and Wayne, one of your past associates, Deb Hutchins, speaks very highly of you. And I've never met you in the past, but Lamont, Wyoming, my grandfather homesteaded that in 1918, and I know you spent a lot of time driving through there to work. So I can feel the cohesiveness here, and I'm a pretty good people person. I think you guys know that, and I commend that. Charlie, you're a wealth of knowledge. You paid attention during your tenure. I can see that. And I forgot to Sean, proud papa, cutest baby ever. Congratulations. I was curious where I owe the city manager here, the administrator, an apology from the last time I was here. I did find out one thing, though, Mr. McDonald. Evidently, the gas line is no longer active up there through that property. I don't know if that's true or not. Somebody volunteered that to me. But that brings me to the question. I told you I was really supportive of that trail going up through there, and I hope you can pull that off. But has any progress been made on that? Or is it just kind of behind the scenes?
Well, I believe that the movement is to get it resurveyed and replatted so that we really know what we're talking about. And the discussion I heard put that sometime this summer.
Your Honor, correct, on the surveying, we're still identifying properties for a trade and still progressing with the effort, but it needs surveyed, and the better time to survey it is when there's a little less snow.
Right.
Although, well, go outside and look.
Yeah.
Well, it could be earlier than this summer.
You know,
well, we could also get bogged down in the mud.
when I was on the county parks board, I remember looking at a map, and I don't know whatever happened to it, but it showed a survey through that, and wasn't that a CCC project? And I wouldn't think those people would have done anything without surveying that, but I did find, I think I mentioned this when I was here before, if you look at a GLO map, I think it was 1920, it shows a power line going up that. And of course, there was a mine on top of the hill, and it wasn't a power line, it was a telephone line. And it actually, it almost follows, and near as I can tell on the contour lines, right where the trail ends up, and that makes sense. But I'm thinking there was a survey, and I know there were some things going on with some maps disappearing and what have you, but I did have the subdivision map for Brookside. I had two of those. I'm trying to think the realtor here in town, he donated some property to the county up there. And it doesn't show any of the, Dick, you guys know what I'm talking about. But it didn't show any of the trails, it showed the roads.
Right, and that last discussion I had about this with the city attorney is that there's some record that mention the area, and that's from like 1939, and then there's a map from like 10 years later, but there's no way to actually define where the trail is with that 1939 reference.
Okay.
So that's when we get into issues of you know, a trail is essentially a public benefit, but it has to be defined down to every inch of that trail.
You know, on the Casper Mountain Landowners Association site, you get a little buzzing going on once in a while, but I think if you're going to run into some obstacles, it's going to be at the very top. And you need to be proactive in looking at who the ownership is so you can get on there and hook on up into Hogadon. And, you know, Hogadon, there's some real opportunities there. You know, just trying to be a visionary, there isn't a whole lot of lots left up there. There's vacant land, but there's not, you know, water really holds it back. But if you get the lodge built, and I'd hate to see us scale that back. I have friends that probably scalp me for saying that, but you know, that could be a real drawing card there for the year-round aspect of it. But on the east side of that parking lot, you got a golden opportunity to develop some condos up there. And I don't think the city wants to be in the real estate business, but there's private property right along that, and that would tie right to the trail system. And I heard some other good information too. Dick O'Hearn today over in the work session, the county commissioners mentioned that the organized bicycle group is talking about trying to push an $8 registration fee. That's on a statewide basis. It needs to be $35, the same thing as snowmobilers and ATVers pay, as long as the money goes back to trail maintenance and trail development. So, you know, there's some real opportunities there I see. And I do want to go on record, and I'll get out of your hair. There was a report done by the University of Wyoming Agriculture Division back in 2012. They've done it a multitude of times, but snowmobiling is a $142 plus $million expenditure recreational sport in Wyoming. And the majority of that is coming from out of town. I was shocked. And I would encourage any of you to take a look at that, because that helps your coffers here big time. An average snowmobile, and I don't sell snowmobiles, I've ridden for years, but you know, some of them sell from $13,000 to $15,000, and that's sales tax. And the biggest dealers are right here in town. And then closed trailers anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 new, and of course the four-wheel drives to pull them. But what I was shocked is the state, there's about 32,000 registered snowmobiles last year, but there was about 45,000 ATVs or ORVs, the side-by-sides. So they've really caught on. And, you know, I share that with you because we're all partners in the use of that mountain up there. And it's a drawing card for the Convention Business Bureau, as the lake is and everything else. But I see a lot of non-murderized type of thinking going on here with the promotions in different areas, and that concerns me, because that is a drawing card bringing people into the community. So, and there was only about 18 cars in the Biathlon parking lot last week, and that's been about the average for the meets. I felt sorry for them because the interstates were all closed. Right. But they got a long ways to go to get that moving. So, thanks for the time.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else care to address council? Welcome, Mr. Steensland.
Steensland, 533 South Washington. Kind of hard to follow some of these guys. You better jump in early when you want a question answered. My concern is the Casper Ice Center chiller system replacement. I was under the impression that we just did a repair on that maybe less than 6 months, maybe a year ago, to bring it up to snuff. Why are we needing a replacement project for that ice? as young as it is and as little use as it gets?
The manifold was in bad shape, and we were keeping, the first money that we spent on the chiller was to keep the ozone from eroding and no longer having amphibians on the planet. Not kidding. It was leaking a lot of ozone. I mean, Freon. To that end, we are doing another repair, and now we need to actually replace the chiller system.
Are you
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Stevenson, the chiller is over 30 years old. It's original equipment at the ice facility by the rec center. This is not the sheet of ice at the event center. And so the equipment is original equipment from when the ice arena that was originally put in. I've been over there and taken a look at that equipment, and I think it's warranted.
So it doesn't have to do with the ice per se, it's for the building itself, is that what?
That's correct. The chiller is in the bowels of the ice arena, and it's a separate thing. It's not under the ice. It's a separate system.
That clarifies that. Can you tell me what we're doing to Washington Park Pool?
Your Honor, there's several repairs to the Washington Park pool that's been scheduled for some time. I believe a liner, and then my memory's a little vague after that. And Andrew's still here about specifics on that. This part was the contract for the design of those changes and everything, but there's been several projects online to improve Washington Park pool for quite a while.
Right.
The changing room, I think, was built in 1920 or somewhere, and it's truly
That's
pathetic.
part of this 77,000?
Well, it's part of the planning for it.
Okay.
But it was either close it or rebuild it. It was a pretty simple decision we faced.
And I mostly remember the liner needing to replace because it's leaking.
The normal lifespan of a pool is, as we understood, it was about 40 years. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
It's about 40 years, and Washington Park pool is, I think, 75.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Questions or comments first? Okay. Anyone else would care to address the council? Please approach. No one else? Okay. Well, let's go around the dais. Starting with Councilman Schlager.
Maybe if we could just have a brief discussion from some of our council experts that have been attending the improvements to our garbage collection so that our concerned citizen can hear a little bit about the thought process of how we arrived where we're at and the purpose for why we made some changes. And hopefully she's listening and can get some information from us. So I was hoping whoever kind of is our liaison on that board might be able to describe a little bit more in detail how that process came about.
I'll do that when it's my turn.
Okay.
Okay.
So otherwise, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don't really have too much to report on my behalf. I wanted to talk to the few people who have gotten up here today. For me, especially, again with Councilman Hiley, it's good to hear from everyone who are bringing these issues up to us. And I thank you for taking your time to come up here and do this for us, because it's good to help people like me learn about the issues that are out there. So I appreciate what Mr. DePaul was talking about and Mr. Lamont dealing with the mountain issues. And your feedback is appreciated when we go back and make these decisions. And just for me sitting in this spot here, I really do appreciate and listen to what you guys are trying to say. But that's all I wanted to comment on this evening. Thank you.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll do my best on the landfill issue. One of the biggest expenses that we face with landfill operation is the creation of cells, which need to be lined and it's a very expensive process. And so the quicker we fill up a cell, the sooner we have to build another one. And I don't remember the exact percentage, but I believe it's something like 40% of the material that's brought to our landfill is recyclable leaves and grass clippings that end up in the landfill because we haven't figured out a way to systematically collect them. So this is an effort for us to designate certain days as lawn clipping and leaf collection days so that that material can be diverted from the landfill stream, thus extending the life of these cells and reducing our overall cost because we don't have to build a new one as quickly. And so this may or may not be the right solution, but that is the purpose of it, is to change some of the extra trash collection days to lawn and leaf refuse collection days. And just my personal opinion is we all should be doing a better job of reducing our trash. And when we have these large containers that are picked up every week, quite frankly, it mystifies me that people can fill those up week after week after week and then still need extra trash collection days for the other stuff they need hauled off. So that's just my personal opinion, but I see no reason why this shouldn't work, but that is the reasoning. How close did I come, Mr. Beamer? The other thing I'd like to mention, it's already been mentioned, is I was honored to be present for the opening of Fire Station 3. Is it 3 up at Sunrise? I get it. That's 2. And I want to echo some of the comments that, first off, this is a badly needed build project for the Paradise Valley station that was in very bad condition, but it accomplishes a number of things all at once. It replaces a station that needs to be replaced, and that is the station that has the hazmat capability, and so that will help us upgrade our capacities there. But as others have mentioned, when we are facing these downturns and our private sector is faltering, we as a municipality can play a significant role in helping the economy keep going and keeping some of our local construction firms alive. And we're doing that with the Mike Cedar project. That's happening with the YMCA project. It will happen with the Hogadon Lodge. It will happen with the David Street Station, the downtown plaza. And it's also happening with Fire Station number 6. And these things all have a combined effort of trying to keep our economy going through difficult times. And as far as Mr. Sweeney's concerns about the possibility of our collections being slowed with 1 cent 15, I would like to remind everyone that with the unallocated funds from 1 cent 14, we kept $9 million back, and we called it an opportunity fund, but one of the reasons we kept that money back was we wanted to make sure that we could make good on our 1 cent 15 promises to the public when that vote was passed. And so if we have to, that's another option we have, is to dip into that opportunity fund to make sure that we fix our streets, that we get this station built. I don't think we will have to do that, but those things will happen because that was a promise we made. Thank you.
Just a couple meetings this week. Economic Joint Development Powers Board tomorrow, and then Casper Housing Authority on Thursday. So busy with some meetings this week. That's all I've got.
Councilman Hiley.
So I appreciated some of the comments this evening, particularly the shop local sentiment. I too, when I was reading through the contracts, was very pleased with the success of the local vendors and discerned that as positive and encourage the city staff who develop these contracts and bid processes to continue to look to our local vendors and as sources for doing business. I don't have any meetings this week, but I'm dedicating the balance of my week to attend the WHAM Winter Workshop, where, as again, new councilman, WHAM offers some value to the city, including local government boot camp, and that's what I'll be doing for the next couple of days. So that's it.
Councilman Johnson.
The Natrona County Sheriff's Office took a really hard hit this week with the death of Lieutenant Jerry Clark. And as a deputy that worked under him for almost 9 years, it's a tough loss for me and all of us at the Sheriff's Office. And I'll be attending his funeral on Thursday. He was a great man, and I think as a community we've lost a really good person this week. So that's all I wanted to say.
Vice Mayor.
Attended last Wednesday, attended as much as a member of council, but as a private citizen, the Hogadon Lodge meeting to see their progress. One of the things that came out of that is we need to be looking at maintenance and operational costs. Their questions were, can we still afford it? And the question is, Councilman Powell, as City Manager McDonald have mentioned, that the funds have already been set aside for the building of the building, but nobody looks down the road at day-to-day operations and maintenance of the building. And we are hoping that those things are looked at in the overall operations and the maintenance. So that was passed on to them, as well as looking at, in essence, the life cost of a building. Do you put exposed wood on the outside of a building up there that is going to deteriorate and need maintenance every year, potentially, and particularly on the west side? So those are the things that were brought up and added to that meeting. Attended a Joint Powers Water Board meeting today, and Site 4 for the airport elevated water tank looks to be a very viable position for the tank, and the adjacent property owners appear to be very amenable to it. And so at this time, looks like the previous site will probably be removed from council or county planning and zoning, but it still has to be ferreted out. But that's kind of where that looks like that's going. So trying to make progress forward to install the new water tank at the airport and move on down the path to get the old tank demolished and foundation in before winter comes this year.
Thank you. I also attended the Regional Water Board meeting today, and yeah, we're narrowing it down. Site 4, adjacent, contiguous with waste connections, is the site that we're moving forward on, and we've found cooperation from adjacent landowners. We have easements, so everything is a green light with that site selection. Other than that, I don't really have anything to report other than the fact that in my note-taking, I have marked a box around economic loyalty. That's important. We really do need to kind of work together to get through the lean times. And we need to also minimize our discussion of the lean times, because we can create a worse economic condition by chicken littling this whole situation, because we do have options. We do have reserves. We do have economic diversity a little bit. So it's not as bleak as it seems. Although when you talk about WHAM's effort to maybe get some consideration from the state legislature for funding, it's a lobbying effort, and our negotiating position is you already took all the consensus money away. So we've essentially reduced the funding to cities and towns by half, and like it or lump it. So that's, that's going to be the vociferous discussions happening in the state legislature, and our representatives of WHAM will try and make the case that maybe there is some criticism that is valid, because I know that Governor Meade has been talking about helping out towns and cities, don't leave them out to dry, and that maybe we don't need to continue socking money into the rainy day fund, which they are, which this budget does. So, politics is not a pretty thing, but it's necessary to just hammer away at the details. So we will continue. Anyone else? Anything else? All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, yeah, let's announce those next meetings. The next meetings of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, February 23rd, 2016 in the council's meeting room, and a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, March 1st, 2016 in the council chambers. Chair would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Vice Mayor Kathy. Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
We're adjourned.